Give me 5 pounds next time. That's all I want.
Billy did say he's pulling back.
Pull that mic closer to you.
There we go.
Here we are, Real Recovery Talk. I am your host, Tom Conrad. In today's episode, we've got Benjamin B.
What's happening?
And I forget your first name. Ryan, right?
Ryan, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Ryan and I go way back. I'm just kidding. We have Ryan here. Ryan wanted to come on the podcast. Ben sought him out, and Ryan and I met a long time ago at a meeting locally here, I think. When Ben was saying you were coming in, I always just knew you as the guy that always had the Atlanta Braves gear on.
Oh, yeah.
So thanks for coming on.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
First things first, thank you for tuning in on the podcast app, whether that be Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play Music. Ben, we're everywhere, aren't we?
We are everywhere.
And thank you for watching on YouTube. YouTube is where it's at, Ben.
I like YouTube University.
What's that?
It's like where I get all my education.
Oh, I see what you're
I
saying.
could become an expert at anything on YouTube.
Yeah.
Fact.
I mean, suppose that whatever you're watching is expert.
It's safe to assume it is.
Sure. It's on the internet.
Good world out there, yeah.
Again, thank you for watching on YouTube. If, in fact, you want to reach out to either myself or Ben, you can always email us, tom@realrecoverytalk.com and ben@realrecoverytalk.com. And we're just going to ask you about your current situation. We're going to want your phone number. We're going to want to call you. We're going to want to have a conversation. We're not going to be all up on the keyboard for forever. Right, Ben?
Correct.
So send us an email, give us your phone number, and we'll send you a text. And ultimately, we want to help you turn your mess into your message. Right, Ben?
That is it.
All right, Ryan, here we are. So take us back a little bit, your childhood, growing up. Tell us a little bit of your story. I tell all of our guests that the primary listener of this podcast, I would say 60% of our listener base is going to be families and loved ones.
Yeah.
And then the other 40% are addicts that are either in recovery or looking for help, and sprinkle in some family members that, listen just to say that they support the show and everything else, when in reality, they don't really listen. Hence my wife. She's like, oh, yeah, that was a great episode. I'm like, oh, do you remember this part? No, I must have missed that part. Do you ever get that, Ben?
Yeah, no, definitely. Well, actually, Whitney never watches them.
Yeah, it's probably better.
Yeah. Let me give a shout out real quick. Since you're talking about who listens, you said about 40% addicts. I'd probably agree with that. But this thing is totally possible. There is a dude, I'll give first name only. Shout out to a guy named Sean. He had reached out to me like probably just over 3 months ago, and he's like, hey, man, can I call you and talk to you? And he's in a part of the U.S., let's just call it what it is. Meetings aren't everywhere. He's kind of in the middle of nowhere. And he's like, I really feel like I got to do this thing on my own. And we've been keeping in contact via text, occasional phone call, and he reached out to me 2 days ago, and he's like, man, I got 3 months. And he's like, I listened to every episode beginning to end, and he was telling me how he's never been a religious guy, but like after listening to the podcast, he's like, I can repeat everything you guys say. I know what you're all about. And like he was telling me how he's like starting to believe in God, and he had a God moment, and what I would refer to as a white light experience type thing that they talk about. That doesn't happen for everybody, but I was just really taken back, man, that, I got a dude that's like simply listen to the podcast and keeping in touch. It's all about connection, right?
What's the opposite of addiction, Ben?
Connection, Tom.
That's right. Well, thanks for that. I'm sure Sean liked to hear that.
Yeah.
All right. Ryan, it's on you. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Awesome. All right, guys. Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. And a little background is, I was born out in California, Fairfield, California. My father was military. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. Got one older sister. Let's see. I honestly don't remember much about being out there, but we moved over to Georgia, and I grew up. Hence the Braves shirt that you remember. Love the Atlanta Braves. But yeah, man, grew up up until like 6 or 7. Childhood seemed pretty normal, if you will. Dad worked, mom worked. My sister and myself went to school. No real issues, but come about the age of about 7 years old, 7.5, 8, things started getting weird at home as far as I can remember. And my dad ended up, filing for divorce from my mom. Well, later down the line, I found out that my mom she's one of us, she ended up, getting back into old habits, and my dad really didn't want it around us kids. So, they set for divorce. And back in that time, it could still be happening now, but they were more in the, the woman's favor in Georgia. So, split custody. And with that, I started seeing a lot of things at a young age I shouldn't have been. It was, got bad pretty quick. My mom would take my sister and I on like late night runs in the middle of the night. Just a lot of, looking back, I can kind of tell what it was, but just not a good environment. So it didn't take long, honestly. My mom got locked up pretty soon after. And being a kid, 7.5, 8, that's really when things like began to set in for me. A lot of fear. I would go to school and look at all these other kids that were happy, and I was afraid to talk to them about anything going on at home. I didn't think they would understand. I thought they went home to like, mom and dad, their happy lives. So yeah, at that age, a lot of fear started to set in. Just super worried. And during that time, there's just a lot of changing. My dad took sole custody of us, but, my dad being military, I never learned how to communicate, and I carried that with me throughout, the rest of, my life moving forward. It was hard. It was, I, pretty good kid though, stayed out of trouble for the most part. Made good grades, made a lot of friends. I was that kid who was like a chameleon. We all, talk about at times. I kind of blend in wherever I needed to. Played sports, made good grades, but carried around that fear, that emptiness inside of, nobody really understands me.
That's interesting. I think that a lot of the things that we go through as children, growing up, it really is setting the stage for what's to come. I mean, growing up and with your mom getting locked up and then your dad taking sole custody of you, do you remember like the shift in your mindset of like, did you go into like survival mode? And then you said your dad was like a military guy. So was he like deployed or was he always stateside? What was it like growing up for you? And then ultimately, when did you like take your first drink or your first substance or whatever?
Yeah. So no, my dad actually left the military when we left California and moved to Georgia. It was more or less the communication style is what I mean when I talk about his military background, because it was very just straightforward. How you doing? You good? And, good was pretty much you got food, you got a place to sleep. It wasn't, anything deeper than that. And unfortunately, I believe that's more family, generational trauma, if you will, or generational communication.
So he wasn't emotionally, I guess, to put it in other terms, he wasn't emotionally vulnerable with you guys or you and your sister, right? Did you say
correct? Yeah,
sister?
One older sister.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that just wasn't there. And, his father was military, and most of the men in my family the same way. So I never really learned that proper communication until I found myself in recovery.
Interesting.
But, looking back, the shift, honestly, was there a certain point that I realized it? Looking back, it's kind of tough. I think it was I saw my mom get locked up at that point. I saw, the cops come and take her away. And a lot of it was I didn't understand what exactly was happening. And with that, I think that's where a lot of the fear began to develop. On top of that, a family that didn't communicate and didn't want to, I don't know if they didn't want to tell me and my sister, from their own worries or what exactly it was, but there was just a lot of unknown, being a child too. And I think it was that, along with, I didn't know how people were going to, perceive me. I didn't know what their view on me was going to be now, because I got a mom who's gone. My dad took custody of us, and I don't know how to tell my friends any of this stuff. I guess that's kind of the best way I can put it.
When did you pick up? When did you get involved in substances?
Growing up, my dad would let me have a little sip of his beer here and there if he was having one, but that wasn't anything crazy. When I was about 13, I think it was 13, 14, right around that time, I remember me and one of my best friends, we sat down, went through his parents' liquor cabinet. We found the old Smirnoff vodka and started taking, shots. And it was like a lot of people say, it was that aha moment for me. A couple shots down, it burned, tasted terrible, but all of that fear and like insecurity inside of me just started to dissolve. And I was like, wow, this is what I was missing. I need this. And that was it. That was enough to get me going. At that point forward, I know me and like my best friend, we were like, hey, we're going to do this every weekend. We were cutting up, shooting pool in the basement, laughing, just not a care in the world. And that's what I wanted. For me, it felt like freedom, so I was going to keep chasing that, whatever I had to do.
That's to a T, the same example for me.
Yeah.
The getting the different kinds of liquor and that freedom you're talking about. I remember saying to myself, now I know why adults do this. Like, I need this. Every chance I get, this is what I'm doing. I'll never forget that feeling.
Yeah, that was it.
When did it start getting a little out of hand for you?
Honestly, it didn't take long. Freshman, sophomore in high school, I quickly got into a bunch of other substances that were there for me. I always hung out with older people. My sister was 2.5 years older than me, made a lot of friends and started doing, there's a lot of drugs. As I started getting into a lot of drugs because I could do those. I didn't smell like alcohol. I learned that I could function through school and not get caught. And it did not take long. By the age of, I would really say 16, I had a full blown habit with cocaine, me and a friend of mine. And it was bad. We'd get to school. He'd always pick me up in the morning. It was the first thing we'd do. Pretty much meeting each other in between classes. After school, we were going on runs. And that kind of turned into a bunch of other stuff. But also in that time, I started having a bunch of seizures in high school. So I had to go to a neurologist. The neurologist is telling me like, hey, you can't be doing all these stimulants. This is, terrible for you. Come to find out, I actually had like juvenile neurotic seizures. So I justified to myself, I'm going to put this stuff down and only, use depressants. So more alcohol, smoking and anything else to bring me down to justify that. But,
what is a juvenile neurotic seizure? Is that something you've grown out of?
Yes, yeah. It was, my neurologist broke it down to me. It's a grand mal seizure is how it happened for me. But, he told me it's something you can grow out of, just a form of epilepsy. So for me, looking back, one of the big things was stress. All this anxiety I had upon myself, along with sleep deprivation, was one of the main things that was triggering all these.
And you just offered that info up to your doctor? Yeah, I'm doing blow every morning.
Oh, no. I was 16, man. They drug tested me pretty quick, right. And they were looking at it and was like, I remember I had this really cool doctor. His name's, Dr. Lockenpaul, and he was just like, hey, man, you can't be doing this stuff. And just kept it real straightforward with me. And, my, addict mentality at that point was like, okay, I just won't do that. but I'll do this. And, of course, later down the line, I thought I was fine and got back into the other stuff. But, that was another point though, where like, I don't want to be different than all these other people. Why is it me that has, epilepsy? Why do I have issues with this? So, later down the road was like, let me prove them wrong. I'm going to do more of this stuff now. And, for a while it would work and I'd be fine. And then next thing you know, I'd be in Walmart and have a seizure and,
Wow.
Yeah.
That's gotta be scary. So when did you go to treatment for your first time?
21 years old, actually. I did that geographical cure a couple times, I left Georgia. My father got remarried when I was 16 and, he was up in New York at this point, upstate, out in the country. So I kind of called him, told him, hey, I need to get away. I got to get out of Georgia. It's not good for me. Of course, didn't divulge all the information of what I was actually going through, but he flew down. We jumped in my car, took off. And, at that point, I was, full blown addicted to opiates. So my thought process was, let me take, one Suboxone strip and we're going to drive to New York and everything's going to be better. So I get up there and, this is where, I can look back and see, I was full blown alcoholism. I put that down and just started drinking like crazy. I was blacking out, wrapped my car around a tree, had a tractor pull it out and drove it home. And then, of course, telling my dad that a deer ran out in front of me.
Oh, dude.
Man, just all the stories, and it was just bad, it got bad like that, and
we're the same person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
that was at 21?
21. Yep. And, so they, I was in New York with them for a short period, but they quickly realized what was going on. And, they were like, we got to get you out of here. And I'd never been to treatment, and they said, you want to go to Florida? And of course, born in California, grew up in Georgia. I'm up in New York at this point and I'm like, winter's coming and I don't want to be cold. So I said, Florida sounds good. They sent me down there and, I thought they were going to teach me how to drink like a gentleman. Honestly, I thought I was going to be able to, control all this, all this usage that I had issues with. So
you came to Florida for treatment?
I did. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to treatment. I'm going to learn how to drink responsibly.
Oh yeah.
Where'd you go to treatment?
Oh man, I was in Fort Lauderdale. Oh man, it's been a while.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember the name of it now.
Well, it didn't stick.
Yeah.
Maybe no fault of the treatment center, but so you went to treatment at 21
Mm-hmm.
and then how did you stay sober after that, or how long after you left there till you picked up?
They transitioned me into some halfway, and I think I stayed sober for 3 months, maybe. And I think that was just from hanging around the people who were doing it at that point. But I did what I do best. I kind of ran from my problems. I couldn't pay rent there or anything else. Meanwhile, I'm 21, but I'm a child still. So I called some friends, all my buddies back in Georgia. I was like, hey guys, can I come back up and stay with y'all? I'm done down here, so they're like, yeah, we'll get you a bus ticket. Before I got out of the state of Florida, I was already using. So yeah, I got back to Georgia and just hit the ground running for the most part.
And you went to treatment. When was the last time you went to treatment when it actually, something changed?
Well, I mean, this last time I wasn't able to go to treatment, to tell you the truth. I didn't have any insurance, really didn't have any connections at that point to help me out. And this girl reached out to me and she offered to let me, detox on her couch. And she was like, I'll send you enough money to get down here. And, that was a leap of faith on her part. And it was kind of wild because at that point I was, full blown heroin addict. And, the night before she had reached out to me, I'd done enough that, I was planning on not waking up. And I shouldn't have, but I did. And, that her message came across the phone, first thing I came to, and, it just kind of hit me. It was that little bit of hope that I needed. and I just ran with it. I said, I got to get back down here. I'm going to die. I'm not going to make it any longer. I'd been homeless for about 6 months, well, the high end of homeless. I had a car. So, I'd been sleeping in my car, but, but I was in an abandoned neighborhood back in Georgia at this point, and it was terrible. It was spiritually bankrupt, just empty inside. But yeah, when she sent me that message, it gave me hope. And I drove from, I'll joke about this when I tell my story, but like I drove from Georgia, outside Atlanta, all the way back down here in a red GTO with bad tags and no insurance. And somehow I made it all the way down here, and a lot of times I talk to people, I'm like, that's God, there's no other way I could have made it. It was pretty crazy.
I hear those stories all the time. You'll hear about someone like, oh, they got stuff in the car. You're guaranteed to get pulled over. Mm-hmm. So many stories, though, where people are on their way to treatment and somehow make it. It's definitely a God thing.
Yeah.
So when you got down here and you kicked on her couch, so let's get more into the recovery process.
Yeah.
You obviously had your stabs at this, per se, in terms of getting sober. What was different this time? Like, what did you do differently? Walk us through that a little bit.
Sure. So we were talking about treatment. I did go like previous, like 2 other times. And, it seemed like each time I went, I started to listen a little bit more. I was in North Carolina at one point and actually worked the steps, but then saw it as, a finish line, so I got through and didn't really sponsor or do anything else. The time after that, I put together a 1.5 year sobriety that time, failed to enrich, my spiritual life and do that. And I did that again. I came back down to Florida, put together a 1.5 years of sobriety, and same pattern. This time, what was different, I honestly understood this as life and death. Like AA, we talk about it. It's like, we conceded to our innermost selves that we were alcoholics. I felt it, and I knew that if I was going to go back out, that I wasn't going to make it back. With that, I was, ready to make an honest beginning and really do this. So I, got a sponsor and hit the ground running. Honestly, I kicked on that girl's couch, but I ended up having like more grand mal seizures while I was detoxing. Ended up in JFK hospital, and they, luckily, they actually put me in like a drug-induced coma for a few days, which actually brought me through the worst part of the withdrawals, and then went straight to halfway. So at that point, I believed there was not really any other options for me. It was do this or die. And I didn't want that to happen,
So it was more it sounds like you were offered the gift of desperation.
Absolutely.
I want to touch on something real quick too. We were actually just talking about this on the last episode. The gentleman that we had on the episode previous was a one time in treatment. Here you did a few, but you said something key. You like picked up on, you listened a little more every time. And I just want to point out to families, loved ones, like because my story and your story, like the ages and everything are so similar. But the fact that you didn't get it going to treatment, it wasn't a waste of time.
No,
like those experiences got you to where you're at today. And so many folks out there are hopeful, like, oh, I want to. Sometimes I'll ask Tom and I on the phone, like, oh, if they go to treatment with y'all, what's the likelihood? Can you guarantee me they're going to stay sober? I'm like, well, no.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, like, you got to give somebody the opportunity. You never know when they're going to have their aha moment. Because actually, to disclose the same thing, I didn't get to go to treatment getting sober this time either. Mm-hmm. But I had taken everything that I learned from previous treatments. At this point, for me, I had no resources either. Like, I had no insurance. No one was willing to pay for a treatment for me. And I ended up detoxing on my mom's couch when they were like done with me. I was so lucky that they let me do that. But like jumping into the meetings, doing all that previous experience is what I knew to go to.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely. It taught me a lot that, I still carry with me to this day.
Would have been easier if I went to had the opportunity to go to treatment that last time, but
Yeah. But
So when you find that you're, now that because you're coming up on, would you say 6 years now?
yes, yep.
Okay.
Coming up on 6.
So you've obviously gone through the process. You've built your life up now to this point. You're gainfully employed. You're, seemingly have everything going for you that sobriety has to offer. When you have Ryan come in front of you, that's been down the path that you've been down and is kind of just trying to find their way through all this, like what are some first conversations that you have with them? Like, how do you portray that message of hope? Because a lot of times people don't have it. They don't have the hope. They don't feel like they can get where you are. I remember sitting in meetings with people and they're saying that they were a grateful alcoholic and they had 5 years of sobriety. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like I can't even wrap my head around that, So take us a little bit, into that with newcomers and stuff, because I think it's very important. And Ben, honestly, I don't think we discuss this enough. When people are, in their first couple weeks, couple months, even couple years of sobriety, it's not easy.
No.
I mean, it's not. So how do you navigate that with newcomers?
Sure. I mean, a lot of times I'll try to connect with guys at first. That's the big thing. And, we all have a lot in common, when we sit down and actually have an honest conversation with each other. So I usually kind of open that door up first, just have a talk with them, ask them about their past, ask them about, how they ended up down here. As soon as conversation gets going, you'll realize, there's a lot in common, but then, I kind of let them know a lot of my story and how I ended up in here. And, sometimes that'll kind of light their eyes up a little bit and realize, hey man, I'm not alone. There's somebody else who's been through this stuff as well. I feel like, started it off connection. A lot of people coming in don't have connection. I feel like a lot of people I talk to nowadays, they don't know how to fit in. They don't feel a part of a lot of times. So kind of inviting those guys in, and kind of, just letting them become part of, is a lot of times enough to get them started. With that though, the steps are kind of like my go-to, it's, I work a program of AA and, I try my best to break things down for them a lot of times and, layman's terms, because these guys come in, they go to a meeting, they see these steps on the wall and it's, God and this and that, and they get overwhelmed and confused. So sitting down with them and just trying to explain a lot of that and kind of helping them through it.
Did you have somebody like that in your sobriety when you first got down here, and you kicked it, you were free and clear, talk a little bit about that
Sure.
person or group of people. Cause I agree with you. I think one of, if not the most important thing is finding a group of people, a tribe per se that you can attach yourself to.
Let me ask a question related to that.
Sure.
Did you go to Bill's halfway?
I did. Yep.
So that's making sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So funny quick story is Bill was the guy who came and picked me up from the hospital, and I don't remember anything, but Bill used to tell me this funny joke. He was like, yeah, you were, half naked outside the hospital in the rain running around and I had to come find you. Well, for a year and a half, I believed him until one day he told me, he was like, no, I was just messing with you. You were just sitting outside waiting. It got me. But yeah, I mean, Bill picked me up and I don't remember anything, but I do remember this conversation and it still, to this day, it struck me. Apparently I'm telling the man my whole life story, just rambling on, which kind of makes sense. I came out of the hospital. They had given me a bunch of, benzos. So, I wouldn't remember anything, but, we finally get to his house and, he looks at me after, me telling him my story and he's like, Ryan, you're going to die. You understand that, don't you? And, it struck me hard. I just believed it. I was like, you're right. And he right after that, he asked me, he's like, have you prayed before? And I was like, yes, I have. There was no real spiritual connection, for the past while. But, he asked me, he's like, will you go pray for faith and pray for acceptance? And, me, I was just like, yes, I will. And right after that was just this this feeling of kind of peace came across me. You know, it was like one of those spiritual experiences. You know, something kind of hit me from the back and told me, Ryan, you're in the right spot and you're going to be okay, and to keep moving forward. And that right there is like, you know, it still to this day kind of gives me goosebumps thinking back to it. Because I hadn't experienced anything quite like that before, you know, and Bill definitely, you know, took me under his wing and, you know, really broke down, you know, the program of AA for me. And, you know, his house was really like a bunch of guys, and like these guys, man, they stay super close, you know, and look out for each other. And that was super important for me early on. You know, I had all these guys around me I could trust, I could talk to, you know, we're all hitting meetings together. Everybody's, you know, working with their sponsors, and, you know, like the housing was, you know, Bill was big on like step studies and like house meetings. So really like developed this just community of trust and, you know, camaraderie, you know, and it was huge, I believe, for my early sobriety.
I want to touch on this as an outsider looking in at your recovery.
Yeah.
So you're part of my home group. I'll just tell the listeners that.
Yeah.
Sorry to blast your internet
Nah,
over there.
Nah, you're fine.
But that's how Ryan and I met. So Ryan had been going to this meeting probably for years prior to me ever going there.
Oh yeah. 6 years. 6
yeah,
years I've been going there. Well,
so
right at it.
I've probably been going to this meeting 2 or 3 years maybe. And I asked about Bill and whether you went to his halfway or not for a reason. There are, Tom was mentioning like finding your tribe, finding your people.
Yeah.
And so I just moved from the Gardens area down to Lake Worth. I was going to some meetings in Delray, and I'm like, you know what? Easy Does It Club is closer to my house. Let me check this out. So I swing into this Friday night meeting, a men's meeting called the Gentlemen's Club. And there was something that really stuck out to me, and it's exactly what you're describing, which is why I asked about it. But there is this guy, Bill, and Bill's got, what, like 25, 30 years, something?
Yeah, I think he's getting close to 30.
Yeah. So, but it's funny because every time Bill would share, it'd be like, my guys, my guys. But like when I walked in, it was so obvious that there was this, and you were part of this group. Yeah. There's like 10, 15 of you that were always there. And like you were saying, we're super close. There was like this core group in there. Yeah. And it was really something special, and still is something special to watch. Like, I don't see a lot of this. Like, whatever Bill's doing at his men's halfway house is, from my perspective, something very special. Because like Ryan said, you can tell they're looking out for each other. Like I've never, I would argue to say in my entire sobriety, I've never seen a group of guys so close. And mind you, I've been going to this meeting for probably close to 3 years, and those guys are still super close. And then I watch them bring in some kid that's off his rocker.
Yeah.
Right. And like 3-6 months goes by, and all of a sudden he's like, went from being a boy to a man hanging out with these other men.
Absolutely.
Like, and I've just watched the guys that get involved with your clique, if you will. Like, literally, when the first time they share in a meeting as a newcomer, I'm like, oh my God, this kid's not going to make it. Yeah. But they're hanging out with y'all. So I'm like, and then some time goes by, they're a totally different person months later. And that has to do, in my opinion, with like that fellowship part there. We have to grow beyond the fellowship and get into the program aspect, but that just stood out to me so much, you know, and seeing the relationships that you have with other men in recovery, like it is so freaking evident to me. Like I'm probably, there's probably more reasons, but like there's no doubt in my mind you stayed sober because of that group of men.
Absolutely.
You know, it's been something special to watch. I'll just throw that out there.
Yeah. And
do I know who Bill is?
What's Bill's last name? Can we say his last name, should we? I don't know.
No.
Probably not.
No. Yeah, I don't know. I'm sure I know him to see him, but Ben, something you said that I think it could be a good topic for discussion. I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but you said something along the lines of you have to build your program beyond your community at some point. Do you? and I know where my head is at with this, but I want to see what your guys' take on this is, in terms of, because I think the most important thing is your community of people, and then you got your program, like your steps and your sponsor and your sponsees and stuff like that.
So what for me, what I mean by that is the fellowship is not going to be enough. Relying on other people in some situations might not be enough. Don't get me wrong. Most of the time, that's my go-to, other men in the program. Mm-hmm. But what happens when that day comes along where I'm on my own? People aren't answering their phone. I'm out of town on vacation. You know, say I go up to Minnesota like I do every year, and all of a sudden I find myself in a bar with the family, and a feeling comes over me. I'm like, man, look at this place. It's like a log cabin, be a great place to have a beer and a shot of whiskey. Like, and the only thing, and I'm the only guy there in the program sober. What do I have against a defense? What do I have for a defense against the first drink? And like, so it takes both. You know, I've got to have those tools. I've got to have something beyond just people. But those people, that community, those men in my life are the ones that taught me about the program. So they're very closely interconnected.
Absolutely.
You know?
Yeah, that makes sense. I think where my head was at, and now that you put it that way, it makes sense. I prior you saying that, I was thinking more, okay, community is, for the most part, going to be the foundation of your sobriety, and then the program and stuff like that is, I was thinking more in terms of, you're not living your fullest potential in your sobriety without working the steps and having a sponsor and having sponsees and stuff like that. So you're not really thriving. I mean, you have a group of people around you, and that's all fine and dandy, but you're selling yourself short of the opportunity of going so much further by not doing those other things. But what you said makes total sense in those situations where nobody is available, which is very few and far between. But in the event that does happen, you know, if I get stranded out in the middle of a desert and I feel and there's a
bottle of tequila,
in the bottle of the desert
next to a cactus.
Then I'm gonna have to have those tools. But Ryan, what's your thoughts on that?
Very similar to what Ben was just talking about, man. I mean, early on, something I heard that just like struck me as well was, this guy told me, he said, "Show me your friends and I'll show you your future." And I probably heard it a million times, but it just kind of made sense to me at that point. And I was like, wow, really who I surround myself with, I'm going to fall in line with. And, the fellowship aspect of it is super important, because you have all these people to help keep you accountable, but there's a lot of like internal work that needs to get done. And that's where I think, having my program for me and, doing what I need to do as of like working through the steps, sponsoring guys, keeping in touch with my sponsor and, being there for others. But like my personal recovery, it's super important for me, because, that time might come where I am alone, where I have nobody else, can't get a hold of anybody, and for me, that's kind of where, my program comes back to like God and, like my connection there, my higher power, if you will. That's why that part's so important. It's because, if I, surround myself with good people and become part of that, but don't do anything to better myself, then I'm, kind of selling myself short. There's a lot more to this that, I could really benefit from.
Earlier in the podcast too, you talked about the 12-step, and that's the other thing. Like, they have to go hand in hand. Without a program, I have nothing to show somebody else. They have nothing to show me.
Yeah.
I want to point out one other thing too that I noticed about the group of guys that you're around too, and whatever's going on there, dude. So a lot of times, we'll have clients here, for instance, or parents that call in, their kids 18, 19 years old. Another thing that I picked up on is that there's a lot of young guys with several years of sobriety that hang out with you. Like, in particular, there's a kid that got sober at 18 who now has like 5 years. There's another kid that was like 18, 19, and he just celebrated like 2 years, I think. But like, it's like the age thing doesn't matter. A lot of times, like, I'll be honest with you, I'm biased. I'm like, they're 18, 19.
Yeah.
They're just going to come in here, check into treatment, check back out, and go back to what they were doing. But again, that the power of what's
Fellowship.
going on in that fellowship, in that program is these guys are 18, 19 years old getting sober, and now they're in their early 20s with several years under their belt. I'm like, so the age thing also, like, your group of guys really debunked that for me.
Yeah.
Well, I think a lot of that has to do with too when you get the younger crowd. And I got sober at 26. Sounds like you got sober at the same age.
26. Yep.
Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah.
When you're younger, you want more. You want to look forward to stuff. You know, you want to see tangible things. You want to. I at least I'll speak for myself. I couldn't comprehend life being any fun without substances.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and when you surround yourself with people that are in the same relative age group and they have been doing this for the past couple of years, and you see the tangible things that they've attained, even on a materialistic level, cars and, you know, they're able to get an apartment, they got a job, they're able to do these sorts of things. Those are the things that we need to really grasp onto in the beginning. Mm-hmm. And I talk a lot about that with tangible things are good to get you sober and to kind of give you that boost, you know, because the more things you attain on a materialistic level, you don't want to give those up a lot of times. And I'll speak for myself. But that's not going to keep you sober, because eventually the materialism, the materialistic side of things, it's not as the novelty wears off. You know, Me, I get a new car. 2 years later, I'm like, Ben will attest to this. I'm like, this car's no fun anymore.
Yeah.
2 years later, 2 weeks later, dude.
Got to find something better now.
Yeah. But the longer that we're sober, it needs to start switching into more of a mental, emotional, spiritual type component. And, you know, I think that's very important. And I think that's where a lot of people miss the mark. And again, going back to what we were talking about, the community, it's good. It's good. It's gonna show you and give you that boost of what you need, because, you know, there's a lot of connections that can be had. I wouldn't be involved in this field doing what I do if it wasn't for the community and the people that I knew and currently know and stuff like that. So there's a lot of opportunity that lies within the community, but those people they're not there. A lot of them aren't there to help me on a mental, emotional, spiritual level, you know, and a lot of those things can only come from God, you know, for me, you know, stuff like that.
Let me touch on that material thing you said real quick. And this is for, if there's any new listeners who haven't heard our past episodes about, like, enabling, so to speak, I want to touch on the material where, yes, I agree with Tom 100%. However, the material stuff that I earn on my own. There's a difference between being handed something. And I'll give you a perfect example. My mother told me this. She's a member of Al-Anon. She's been in Al-Anon longer than I've been sober. Yeah. But she ended up telling me at one point, years into my sobriety, she's like, yeah, there was one point, you know, when you were 16, I thought if I got you a car, you'd feel better about yourself. Your self-esteem would be up. You'd have more opportunity. And this was like, by 16, like you, I was a complete drug addict, like, no question. And it actually did the opposite. Like, the intentions were good, but I could tell you the first time that I bought and earned a car by myself, which I got myself a little Ford Focus, 4 tires that didn't match.
Yep.
Like, you know what I mean? But that meant something to me. And I wanted to hang on to that because I worked for it. So there is a difference there. I just want to point that out. Like,
I grew up in the car business. I mean, my dad was in the car business. I was in the car business. There were no shortage of new vehicles in my life. Every time I wrecked a car, the next day I'd have something new. You know, it was me and my dad, and he was that person that, like, just lavished me with whatever I wanted, you know? And it wasn't until I got into treatment and that wasn't there anymore. You know, the first 6 months, I think I walked everywhere, rode a bicycle. And then I got a scooter, 150 cc, Ben, not
And
that
rode it down
Big boy.
Cameron at midnight.
Yeah.
yeah. 150 cc, not those small little 49 cc ones. I had a big boy. But man, that thing was like gold. And then I had a 1999 Dodge Neon that had a blown head gasket and it was blowing blue smoke out the back, but
Love
it
that.
was like,
Blue.
yeah, that's what happens when you blow a head gasket in a car, you're burning a lot of oil and stuff and the smoke comes blue. But I love that car, and then I ended up getting the jobs and those sorts of things. So everything that I have up to this point is stuff that I earned. And, but you hear so many stories in the rooms of people that have gotten the cars, they've gotten the money, they've gotten the house, they've gotten all this stuff. And then, fast forward and they're, out smoking crack again. And, I know a few people that made tons of money. I mean, more money than I could ever dream of making, and they're dead, because the materialistic stuff ultimately became their God. It was a form of idolatry for them. They worshiped at the altar of money, and the spiritual stuff, the mental, emotional, all was just put by the wayside. And eventually, one guy I know smoked crack and somehow managed to smoke fentanyl and, overdosed. It's sad.
We see that here too with people that used to be millionaires.
Yeah.
They get to treatment later in their life, blew through everything, and for whatever reason, financially unable to get back to where they were. And it's sad to watch. Like, you can tell that's all they ever had. What the saying? The poorest people in the world have nothing but money.
Again, Ben?
The poorest people in the world have nothing but money.
Break that down for me.
If all you have is money and nothing else, it's, I don't know.
Got you.
Or-
Money. I got you. Yeah. Which, like, talking about that, the last time I was sober, previous to this time was my story. I worked through a program, thought I was doing good, but then started chasing money because I was like, I got to be successful. Money's where it's at. And, started making good money, at my age, and started buying all these things. And, there was no actual program of recovery in my life. I slowly backed away from all of it. And it wasn't even consciously I, decided to do this, but, money became my God. And, it didn't take long. That was it, because, I just kind of dug myself into this hole. The money disappears. And, as soon as my God's gone, I'm empty inside, and it didn't take long. I ran through everything I had and lost everything as well. It was funny. We were, talking about that, that red GTO that I was driving. I couldn't even keep paying for it. So I lost that while I was in halfway. And, at this point, I was actually working a good program of recovery. I was pretty peaceful. I wake up one morning, my roommate's like, "Hey man, your car's gone." And I was like, "What? What are you talking about?" So, I walk outside. I thought he was messing with me. Go look outside, and my car's out of the driveway. I was like, "You got to be kidding me." So yeah, I got impounded, but I was doing all the right things at this point, and it honestly didn't stress me. I was like, man, that kind of sucks, but you know what? I'll be okay. That week, my boss gave me a paycheck for $1,200, and I went and bought myself a beater, old Acura, and I love that car. I was happy. That was it, and it's crazy. I think money doesn't buy happiness. That was a lesson I had to learn at an early age. I was grateful I learned that lesson, because still to this day, I carry that with me. Sure, it's nice, you need it in life, but I don't think it's going to buy you happiness.
There's a good lesson in that you just talked about with your car being taken away. Repoed?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
repoed. So we'll get clients here. Same kind of situation. They're already 2 car payments behind. And rather than stay on the path of recovery and take the suggestions to put their recovery first, they jump into this panic and fear mode, like you were talking about in the beginning. Straight fear. I need to do everything I can to make sure that I could keep this car. Nothing else matters. and they make decisions based off of money to keep the car, which they end up losing anyway down the road because they end up relapsing. But a perfect example of like being able to let something material go when you're working a good program, and you're going to get it right back.
Yeah, absolutely. And to this day, it's still the same. You know, like when I lose one thing, sometimes I just take a step back and realize like something better's coming. You know, and it's more or less like, what am I doing on a daily basis? And, you know, am I still doing the right thing? Like, and I'll answer, you know, honestly, I'm like, yeah, you know, I'm still doing the right thing, still trying to help people, and like, I'll be taken care of. You know, it's like example after example, this whole period of sobriety that I've had, that like I'm being looked out for, you know, and it's where that faith just continues to develop. It's amazing. It really is.
So we're running out of time here. I just have one last question, I guess. What's in the cards for you now? Like, what do you foresee happening? What's in the future for you, or anything?
I mean, I like to keep things simple, you know, one foot in front of the other. You know, stick with my program, continue to help guys. And, you know, the longer I stay sober, the more opportunities, you know, there are that are presented to me. I like to keep it simple like that, and, you know, just keep my eyes open, see what's coming.
Cool, man. It's a very serene way to look at it. Right, Ben?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Ben, any final thoughts?
No, I think we've covered a lot. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, guys.
All right, Ryan. Appreciate you coming on the show, man. And I know you obviously helping a lot of guys and doing good work. And man, maybe we'll have you on again later on down the road.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right, that is it for this episode of Real Recovery Talk. Thank you for tuning in. In the end, if you have any comments, questions, or concerns, you can always reach out to us, Tom at realrecoverytalk.com and Ben at realrecoverytalk.com. And ultimately, what we want to do is help you turn your mess into your message. That is it. We will see y'all later.